I'm JP Tuesday.
And I'm Kiki Cannon. As lifelong Disney fans, the work of countless talented Disney creatives have shaped our lives.
Now, as the Disney catalog expands, we're taking a journey through film and television to discover if that spark that shaped us as children lives on in adulthood.
Does your favorite Disney media still cast that same spell? Join us as we find out. We are Rewatching the Magic.
Hi, Kiki.
Hi, Tuesday.
We are recording this episode before Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 is released. By the time this episode will be released, the film should already be out. So, no spoilers from us, because neither of us have seen the movie yet.
Yep. There is nothing to spoil, because we don't know anything.
I'm kind of afraid to make any speculation, because by the time this episode goes out, it'll all be, wrong.
I am going to speculate that there's going to be a bunch of Guardians, there's going to be a galaxy, and it will be guarded good.
Although we were talking before we started recording that we're pretty sure tears will be shed by the end of the movie.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of feels.
Let us know if we were right. If you go to see Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3 and you cried at the end, let us know.
Or in the middle, or at the beginning. Or like me, every time they play the Marvel fanfare.
So let's talk about this movie. This is a weird movie because, well, this movie, a lot of people were expecting it to fail. I remember the articles and the web video and the videos that people were putting up that Guardians was going to be the MCU's first bomb because nobody knows who these characters are. No one cares about these characters. It's going to bomb. Like Batista went back to the WWE as partially to advertise this movie, and they did not even talk once about this movie because they thought it was going to bomb.
I gotta admit, this was the first MCU movie that contained characters that I had never heard of.
Yeah, at least with characters like Iron Man and the Hulk and Captain America and Thor, you at least had characters that you had some familiarity with because you either watched them in the 90s cartoons, maybe you played them in a Marvel video game, or maybe you even read a comic book. But the Guardians, outside of the hardcore comic fan, not a lot of people knew who these characters were. I did not blame people for expecting the movie to fail. At this point, 2014, Marvel is already, the MCU is already situated. They're already, a proven commodity.
We have already passed Avengers.
Yeah.
Avengers has already come out and been a success. We've already hit the first major, phase 1 is done.
Phase 1 is done. We're in phase 2, so we already had Iron Man 3, Thor: The Dark World, and the amazing Captain America and the Winter Soldier. So again, sequels to movies we've already had. This was the first brand new hero.
I mean, imagine having, and I hate to say it because there's been worse come out since. But, imagine we've already passed Thor: The Dark World and people are like, wow, we're waiting for that first MCU bomb.
I mean,
if Thor: The Dark World wasn't the thing that was going to tank you at this point, you're on solid footing. And I say that as somebody who actually likes Thor: The Dark World. It's not my favorite, but I will sit down and watch that movie of my own volition.
That makes one of us.
I mean, movie contains a Loki, so, there's you're going to get me to watch it, so. That's all I need in a movie. Put a Loki in a movie and you're good. Yeah, but even the hardcore comics fans that I knew, I mean, talked over our various MCU entries about my personal time with comics, and I would have considered myself a comic fan, but like even the really hardcore comic collectors, I think I knew one that had actually read a Guardians comic. The rest of them, the ones that actually knew about the Guardians, had only come across them in crossovers with bigger titles.
I have one. I think we both have one friend who was exclusive to Guardians of the Galaxy, and it was a completely different team to what was in the film. Even when the film was announced and the characters were announced, this friend of ours was going, "Wait a minute, those aren't the Guardians."
Yeah, it was not even this team. Yeah.
Because
that's what was said. Yeah.
So yeah, let's kind of brush over the history, because Guardians started out in 1969, and it was a completely different team. It wasn't even technically part of the main Marvel universe, because the comic book took place in the far distant year of 3000, and it was like long, the heroes that we know are long gone, and these were brand new heroes that fought in space against aliens, and it was all space stuff. Now, characters of this Guardians 3000 team would make their way into the movies. Actually, they're the Ravagers in Guardians Volume 2. The Sylvester Stallone and his team, they're the Guardians 3000. So that was kind of their nod to the original team. The team that we do have in this movie actually did not exist as a team until 2008, the same year the first Iron Man movie came out. So even then, the comic books were kind of starting to create characters that would eventually become movies. Like, we're going to take the concept of the Guardians of the Galaxy, but we're going to take these different characters, put it in the same timeline as our main comic characters, and maybe we can spin this off into a movie. We're going to take Carol Danvers and make her Captain Marvel because we want to make that into a movie, and so on and so forth.
And the thing is that they left a couple of characters out even of that modern team.
Yeah, some of them have made their way back. One of them is supposed to be in this Volume 3.
Yeah. And another one is so connected with Captain Marvel that that they just kind of left her out of the team at all. I guess maybe because they think that she might work better in a Captain Marvel story rather than a Guardians story.
Possibly.
Because she was like more a Peter David creation for Captain Marvel. So that they brought over to the modern Guardians team when it got created. So it'll be interesting to see when she gets used.
I mean, she might be in the Marvels. I don't know.
Again, yeah, I mean, I haven't heard, but then again, they're kind of keeping mum about the Marvels, and who's going to be in it. So,
and much like the Avengers, these were all characters that were already established in the comics, and they just brought them together. They were all pre-established characters with their own pre-existing stories, and most of them had their stories completely changed for the movie, I guess, to simplify it and just, we're not going to do a Star-Lord movie and a Gamora movie and a Drax movie and a Groot movie and a Rocket Raccoon movie and then do Guardians. Nah, James Gunn's not about that. We're just gonna throw them in there, make their backstories as simple as possible, and go from there. I mean, it worked the second time when they did it for Suicide Squad. We'll talk more about Suicide Squad later because this movie does influence that as well.
Yeah.
So Star-Lord, as he is in the movie, He was just a kid that got picked up by Ravagers and became a thief. In the comic, he was like an astronaut that got stuck in space, and he kind of became a space cop. Much different than the film version. Gamora, her story sort of stays the same in the films as it does in the comics. The only difference was it wasn't Thanos that destroyed her planet. It was a different group of aliens. But still, Thanos finds her, turns her into a living weapon, and you know the rest of the story from the films. Rocket, amazingly, from what we're seeing in the trailers of Volume 3, it seems they're going to go into more of his comic book origin. So, I mean, we haven't seen the film yet, but I don't really want to do any spoilers for that.
Yeah, all we get in the first movie is that somebody took him. We don't get a from where, and experimented on him and turned him into what he is.
Yeah.
That is all of his backstory that we get in the first movie.
And Rocket Raccoon started out as Beetle's joke, because he was originally Rocky Raccoon, and he first showed up in a Hulk comic when the Hulk accidentally landed on his planet. Yeah, his whole, I mean, if you're familiar with the Beatles song Rocky Raccoon, that was the basis of the entire character. A long, long time ago, there was a young boy named Rocky Raccoon. He even has a best friend named Walrus, Goo Goo Gajoob. And also in the original comic and his first video game appearance, which was Marvel vs. Capcom 3, I believe it was. He had a British accent originally. He was written to have a British accent because he was
Beatles.
Beatles.
Yeah.
However, after Bradley Cooper was casted to play Rocket in the films, now Rocket just sounds like Bradley Cooper, or a voice actor doing a Bradley Cooper impression.
Well, you know, I think it's just mostly that when British people show up in the MCU, we kind of half expect them to be villains at this point.
Hello, Governor, I'm Rocky Raccoon.
Yeah.
Like you know, like if they had kept him British, like John Oliver as Rocket.
That would have been infinitely hilarious.
The other two are like the biggest changes between the original character and how they ended up in the film. Groot originally started as a villain in Tales to Astonish. It's this giant tree called Groot, and he spoke in full sentences. Right on that first cover of Tales to Astonish, you hear this giant tree character saying, "Behold, I am Groot the Invincible, who dares to defy me? The monster from Planet X." Eventually, they would change it up, and he would only say the "I am Groot" from that point on. And I think at some point, Marvel tried to have these two Groots be completely different characters. That the Groot from the Guardians team and the Groot from Tales to Astonish are just two different members of the Flora Colossus species. Can you imagine, you know, Vin Diesel having a huge villainous monologue as Groot?
I mean, I think it would be really interesting one day to have Vin Diesel really have a monologue when somebody translates the "I am Groot," because in the comics, "I am Groot" is basically just what everybody hears, because that's just the syntax of his language. Because the Flora Colossi, that's what their language sounds like. All of the semantics of the language are carried in the inflection and how it's done, which is why Vin Diesel records every single line separately. They're not he didn't just come into a recording booth and say, I am Groot once. He records each one of those separately because they're supposed to be independent sentences conveying independent thoughts.
And apparently James Gunn actually has translations for every I am Groot in the script. Whether he's made all of those translations public or not, I mean, there's like a few that he has made public, like Groot calling Rocket Dad in Infinity War.
Yeah, but the thing is in the comics there are certain people that have learned, and we know from the films as well, because Thor actually says that he learned the language of the Flora Colossi, because it's part of the Allspeak, so that he can perfectly understand Groot. But there are times when, like, human telepaths and stuff, like some of the X-Men,
Jean Grey, especially.
Yeah, Jean Grey, and I think Professor X has done it as well, but have linked with Groot, and the comics have translated it to where you see these like huge monologues because you're seeing it via their telepathy. And I would love for something like that to happen at some point in the MCU. Like, I don't know if it would be a what if or whatever where they do it, or maybe even in the third movie. I don't know.
If only there was a member of the Guardians team that has the ability to connect to a character's mind.
Yeah, I know. If only we had that now. But yeah, but I would love for Vin Diesel to just get like one scene where Groot gets to have like a very long monologue with this like very flowery speech, where Vin Diesel just gets to let go and express all of Groot's feelings.
It's very the I Am Groot reminds me a lot of like the Jadoon from Doctor Who, because it's like show.
Yeah, but it is that I would love some kind of universal translator kind of moment where everybody gets to hear that he's not just repeating I am Groot over and over again. It actually has like this very deep and complex meaning behind it, because I've always loved that part of the character.
And even in the film, by volume 2, all of the other characters have at least understand enough of the language that they can even tell what Groot is saying, especially when Groot decides to swear.
Yeah.
Like, whoa, you got some sap on you, boy. And the biggest change from comic to screen is the story of Drax the Destroyer. In the comics, Drax the Destroyer was an Earthling named Arthur Douglas, whose family was killed by Thanos when he tried to attack Earth. An alien known as Kronos came and took Arthur's soul and put it in a new, powerful body for the sole purpose of killing Thanos. The movie completely takes away all of that. He's just Drax. He has, they keep the wife name, they keep the daughter name, and they keep that he has this vendetta against Thanos, but this Drax is not an Earthling named Arthur Douglas.
Yeah, he's a different species, and they have a completely literal mind, which I kind of like.
Yeah.
It's a great character point. I really like the way that Drax is portrayed.
I mean, it is mostly played as it's mostly played for laughs. But, sure. Another big one that came in was they were going to introduce the Nova Corps in this movie. And in the comics, the Nova Corps are pretty much Marvel's version of the Green Lanterns. Rather than getting power from a ring, they get their power from their helmet. It allows them to fly, allows them to have superpowers. None of that is in the movie. They're just space cops.
Yeah, they're kind of dorky space cops too.
One of them is John C. Reilly.
Like I said, dorky space cops. I mean, another one of them is Peter Serafinowicz, who's very, very cool, but plays it very dorky because dorky space cops.
Yeah.
And of course, they're all led by Glenn Close, who is very, very cool, but
Yeah,
it's impossible for her to play dorky because she's Glenn Close.
Yeah, I was going to mention Jen. That's what I was forgetting. Also, this movie is our first appearance of Josh Brolin as Thanos. While not the first appearance of Thanos in the films, this is the first time Josh Brolin is playing the character. Of course, another big change that they do in the movie is what they do straight up at the beginning is Star-Lord, Peter Quill having this Walkman and listening to this mixtape that his mom made up her favorite songs.
Peter Quill is a Disney princess confirmed. We get the dead mom trope immediately.
Yeah.
In a pretty traumatic way.
She has cancer. He gives her a gift, and she, passes away right there. He's what, 10 at this point?
Yeah, something like that.
It's a pretty traumatic moment, and they're telling him to stay still, not react to it, and it's like he's a kid who just saw his mom die. Like, how is this kid supposed to? And you want this kid to stay still and stay calm, and so just.
I mean, he's a kid in the 80s, obviously being brought up in some kind of rural area since the hospital is apparently right next to like a cornfield or something. And his grandfather, has that kind of like farmer kind of look to him,
Yeah.
It's just kind of how it would have been in the 80s for a boy that age, just like, hey, be a man about it,
Man up. Yeah.
And so him running out to be alone and listen to his Walkman and have a cry where nobody else could see him, it's kind of, I get it.
Yeah.
But of course, that's where the Ravagers pick him up, and he disappears forever from Earth.
Yeah, I mean, we never. Now, granted, this might be something that they might get into Volume 3. Again, we have not seen the movie, so we don't know. Like no one's ever questioned where Peter went to.
I'm sure he ended up on a milk carton or something, like you did back in the day.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure his family looked for him, but also they were never going to find him because he's not on the planet anymore.
Yeah,
and I'm sure S.H.I.E.L.D. of the time realized what happened, but of course they didn't have the ability to bring him back.
They didn't know they didn't know aliens existed yet, because remember, Captain Marvel hasn't happened yet. That wasn't until the 90s.
Well, but they realized something weird happened.
Yeah.
So it was probably something where it was, the abduction of a small child, and, we just never found the body, or he ran away and he's living somewhere.
I mean, I do like when they pick up in What If, that if he hadn't been captured, he'd just be in this dead-end job working at a Dairy Queen.
Yeah.
Working at a Dairy Queen, intergalactic thief. Which life would you want to live?
I do like that Star-Lord was like a nickname his mom gave him, because he liked all the, sci-fi movies, and
his father was from space.
and goofy stuff, and yeah.
I mean, that is one thing that they kept from the comics. The identity of his father was different in the comics than in the films, but we'll get to that another day. But yeah, the just like this movie, the soundtrack is amazing, and yeah, James Gunn choosing all of these songs based on how they fit into his script was great. And the Awesome Mix Volume 1, great soundtrack, great mix of songs.
And bravo to Marvel for being willing to throw the money at it to license all these songs, because it really did work.
Yeah. It also kind of had a negative effect on films, because afterwards people were thinking, well, the secret to success in your movie is to have licensed songs on your soundtrack.
I mean, it's not necessarily a thing James Gunn started, so let's not...
But it did start a trend. Like, there was a lot of movies that all of a sudden had licensed songs on there. I mean, like would Baby Driver even happen if Guardians didn't happen? And I like Baby Driver.
Well, again, though, there's a difference between putting it in there for an artistic reason, which is that movie was edited to fit those songs, and that was a plan that,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it might have helped get that movie greenlit.
Mm-hmm.
Where he was like, see, look, James Gunn was able to do this in one of the biggest movies of the year. Audiences are ready for this kind of aesthetic. But I know that was a plan he kind of had in mind for a little bit longer than that. So I don't think it was kind of like he saw it and was like, hey, I know what'll work here. Licensed music,
But there was a string of movies that just all of a sudden have licensed music for no reason other than to have licensed music. And of course,
it was a bit of a trend there, but
and this movie, the success of Guardians had a negative effect on a movie that was already in production, DC Suicide Squad, the 2016 Suicide Squad, the one no one likes.
Yeah, that one was a rather bad use of licensed music, because the way that they used it was not... It didn't really fit the characters or the tone of a lot of the scenes.
And they re-edited the movie just to put these songs in, and well, our trailer was got the same reception that Guardians had. We're going to re-edit this movie to be more like the vibe of Guardians, the vibe of that trailer, and it just...
Yeah. And if that's good. What they were doing, it did not work.
I mean, to this day, the director of that movie wants to do another edit of that movie and re-release it, and it's like, no, let it go. No amount of editing and whatever your original plan was for this movie was going to save it. Let it go.
But back to a good movie.
Back to a good movie, yeah. This also starts our search for the Infinity Stones. This, the entire thing that leads us to Endgame, where the Infinity...
I mean, we had already seen 2 of them, but we just didn't really know it.
Yeah.
As an audience.
The term Infinity Stones was never mentioned until the post-credit scene in Thor: The Dark World. With
3 then, because I had forgotten about the Dark World preceding this.
Well, we didn't know about the Mind Stone then. We knew about the Space Stone being in the cube, and we knew about the Ether, and we know now here the Power Stone, and we won't find about the Mind Stone until Ultron.
Yeah, I mean, we had seen 3 of them on screen, but the audience was only kind of vaguely aware of them from the comics if you knew what Thanos' quest was already. Because the movies had not revealed what Thanos' quest was, so if you were not a follower of the comics, you didn't really know what the giant California raisin dude was doing here.
But we did get that shout out in Avengers 1 that it was equal to courting death. Although they did not. Thanos
did not bring death into it, which, kind of annoyed. Because
I mean, that's kind of a fun thing we could do at some point is, who would have played death in the MCU if they had gone in that direction.
Yeah, but I don't know. DC still has the cooler death. It's one of the things I will give DC. But, you're going to get that with your Neil Gaiman. The thing is, though, is that they had already, peppered them in, but this is the first time we actually get what it is, what it does, why somebody would want these things.
When we get to the collector, we get our first explanation of what the Infinity Stones are, and our first look at the Celestials, which, would play a part in Guardians 2 as well as
the Eternals.
Yeah.
So the thing about it is, though, is that, we get the setup with Quill, and we get the setup with his love of music and his love of dance.
His favorite movie being Footloose.
Yeah, his favorite movie being Footloose, which, they would bring around again in the Christmas special.
I mean, it would be a plot point in the two Peters, Quill and Parker. Is Footloose still the greatest movie ever made? It never was, dude.
Yeah. But we get that wonderful opening scene of him versus Djimon Hounsou, which I love.
Yeah, I mean, it's probably going to be something we say as we go back to these older MCU movies, is that, the way those scenes were reincorporated into Endgame. Like the opening scene where Quill is dancing and then, here's Rhodey just bashing him in the face.
Yeah. But, here it's him going up against Djimon Hounsou for the orb.
Who they would bring back for Captain Marvel. Him and Ronan coming back for because it had to do with the Krees and they're both Kree.
Yeah. But Quill found out about the orb from Yondu and he thought he'd get there first. And then, of course, Djimon Hounsou's character, whose name I'm forgetting, is there trying to get it to deliver it to Ronan.
Korath, that's his name.
Korath. And so they're there, and it ends up Quill just barely gets out. It gets the drop.
And I do like how they come back to this in Infinity War. Like, hey, we have a rumor that the Power Stone might be on this planet. We're gonna send Korath to go get it.
Yeah, but I also like how they mirror this scene in the What If, where it's Black Panther instead, or T'Challa instead.
Yeah.
And Korath is just so happy to be taken out by Star-Lord, because T'Challa's Star-Lord actually has the reputation that Peter Quill only wishes he had.
And then turn the Ravagers into a force for good throughout the universe, even turning Thanos into a good guy.
Yeah.
Because T'Challa is just that nice of a guy.
But, when Korath is like, what is your name? And he's like, Peter Quill, but you might know me as Star-Lord. And he's like, no, and that's a stupid name. You know, like
that gif of him saying who just has become like a meme onto itself.
yeah. But, you know, Quill goes back to Xandar, which is where the Nova Corps has their central power, and he's going to the buyer that he heard about from Yondu, and he stupidly mentions that he beat out a buyer for Ronan, and the dude on Xandar just freaks all the way out because
Ronan is a wanted man on Xandar.
Well, you know, he's also the Kree that wants to destroy Xandar completely.
He doesn't want this war. He doesn't want this war between Xandar and the Kree to end.
Yeah, they've just signed a treaty between Xandar and the Kree Empire, and Ronan is like, no, I want death and destruction, please. And the ability to carry it out, which is contained in that orb. Because he knows it has an Infinity Stone. Nobody else seems to know except for the Collector, who also wants it. And so that's when the buyer that Quill is there just goes like, no, if Ronan wants this, I don't want anything to do with it, because he will show up here and kill me, and do not want. Thank you and goodbye.
And now Gamora is involved because, hey, Korath failed, I won't fail, because Thanos has lent his elite troops out to Ronan because, hey, we have a deal. You bring me the orb, I will lend you my forces to enact your revenge on the Kree.
Yeah, because, you know, who cares about Kree and Xandar and the Nova Corps?
I'm going to snap them out of existence anyway once I get all of them, so it doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah.
I do like our little Stan Lee cameo as Rocket is searching for the bounty, as Yondu has put a bounty on Quill's head for stealing the stone. And then he's, hey, look at this old creeper. Where's your wife, old man?
Yeah, because Stanley is talking to a woman who is way too young for him. We don't know what his purpose is in talking to this woman, of course, but Rocket immediately assumes it's some sort of flirtation or other, you know, similar thing. So Rocket gets to call him a prevert.
A prevert. I love how he says that.
Yeah.
Oh.
Rocket tries to have a large vocabulary, but it never kind of comes out correctly.
Zoe Saldana, like, is she like the queen of sci-fi now, or what? Because, like, within a 10-year span, she's been part of 3 sci-fi franchises. Like, she was Uhura in the Star Trek reboot. She's Gamora here. She's in Avatar. Oh, now I consider that a franchise since it finally got a sequel.
Yeah, I mean they intended to have the sequel out faster, but, you know,
I think the Fox buyout may have affected things.
Yeah, but yeah, I mean she's kind of up there in that. I'm not mad at it because she's a good actress, but yeah.
So, you know, speaking of Zoe Saldana, let's talk about her sister, Karen Gillan as Nebula. Another sci-fi queen? Because we are doing our Doctor Who retrospective. We're going to end up talking about Amy Pond at some point.
Yeah, I mean, I was kind of surprised when she got the role. Because, I mean, I loved her in Doctor Who, of course.
But she's got that thick Scottish accent.
Well, it wasn't just that, but Amy Pond is a very sweet and likable character. Not to say that she doesn't have strength and a bite to her, but then it's like you see her as Nebula and you're like, oh, she will murder me. She
Weeping
will
angels
murder
look
me and
out.
laugh about it.
So I mean, yeah, and kudos to Karen Gillan. She shaved her head for this. Like
And she
Nebula,
looked so good.
yeah,
Like just out of makeup, like when she did all her convention appearances and stuff around that time, and when she was doing press and everything, and people were like, "Oh, you actually really shaved your head for this?" And she was like, "Yeah, it was easier." And I was like, "Nah, just keep that. I mean, I like a redhead, but like
I mean,
you look
it's
pretty
easy.
good."
It's easier than packing in all of that hair under a bald cap.
The
Ano-
the
but
thing is that I love the character basically in all iterations of her, because I like her in this first film, but I like the way they've allowed the character to grow.
far more than she would have in the comics, because this is a character that has grown from murderous assassin fueled by trauma to just this accepting person who, you know,
I
the
mean,
fact that
yeah, by the last time we as the audience saw her, like I said, we're recording this before we've seen the new movie, but the last time the audience saw her was in the Christmas special that they released, and she's the queen of Christmas gifts.
yeah, she's definitely mellowed out. And all it took was winning a paper football game with Tony Stark.
Yeah.
She finally won something. That's all she wanted, was to win something. Because Gamora always beat her. Gamora never let her win. And she finally won a competition based off her own merits, and that mellowed her out.
Well, it also was the fact that, like, not only did Gamora win everything, but anytime she lost, it wasn't just a loss. It was literally a body part was taken from her.
Yeah, she
Like,
has
she has one of the most tragic backstories in a cinematic universe that is nothing but tragic backstories.
Yeah, she has a robotic arm. She has a robotic eye.
Both of her eyes.
Yeah, both of her eyes.
Yeah, I mean, it's just I'm not sure what on her is actually really her anymore.
Flesh and
You know?
not robotics. Because there's that
Yeah.
one scene in Infinity War where she's completely taken apart. Like how much of Nebula is still the original Nebula?
Yeah, and every bit of that was a punishment for losing something to Gamora.
Now, granted, the character of Nebula was really the only character I was half familiar with going into the movie, because Nebula was one of the main villains in the short-lived Silver Surfer cartoon. If anyone remembers that.
Yeah,
So,
I missed that one, to be honest.
and it was like, since this was the 90s, it was her 90s look where she was not yet a cyborg. She was fully flesh. She had the long black hair. Long black hair, and I was, before I saw what she would look like in the film, I was expecting that look for Gamora. It's like, oh hey, I'm thinking Karen Gillan will look good as brunette. Oh, we're going with that look, huh? And then when they finally have her grow hair in the What If, it's blonde. Okay.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is that later on when it's like, oh, Thanos has to sacrifice something he loves, he actually has to go and like hunt down Gamora because he doesn't actually love Nebula.
Like, yeah, he even says it in the movie. that Gamora is his favorite. You don't really, I mean, a loving parent would never openly say that they had a favorite child, but Thanos is not a loving parent.
Yeah, and the thing is that I think it's really sick that the Soul Stone even kind of works, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But because I don't think that there's even any real love there. But
Thanos believes he loves her, and I think that's enough for the stone. Which, you know,
yeah.
As they went through the movie, there was something that I noticed that I didn't notice the first time I watched it, is that if you go to the part of the movie, the part that was in the original trailer where you see the lineup of the Guardians with their names and stuff, and they show Quill with his little, middle finger crank thing, and they show his DNA, and they say unknown DNA detected. So they were foreshadowing that right at the beginning of the movie, and you're not even paying attention to it.
Yeah, because he's doing silly things there in the middle of the screen.
Yeah.
The thing is that when they, after their truly amazing fight scene, which bravo to that fight scene there on Xandar, as Rocket and Groot are trying to capture Quill for the bounty, and Gamora and Quill are fighting over the orb. But we learned so much about all four of their personalities. So it's great exposition. Just through their fight style, which is what a great fight choreography can do if it's really elevated.
You kind of mentioned when we talked about Clone Wars last week how, Bo-Katan fighting with her legs, and that's kind of what Gamora is doing in this fight scene.
Yeah, and the way that Rocket, he's small, and if you've ever seen a raccoon fight in real life when it gets angry, they are all claws and teeth, but Rocket basically entirely fights with weaponry. He's all guns or throwing things, or Groot, on the other hand, is entirely fights with his body,
He's tall, he's, literally strong as a tree.
Well, yeah, but he also, grows out his limbs and things like that. So it's entirely manipulation of various parts of his body to turn himself into a weapon. Quill is constantly trying to outwit the opponent.
I mean, he's fully aware that he cannot beat Gamora in a one-on-one fight. Gamora is just too good.
And
so he's got
Gamora, yeah.
I mean, he's using his gadgets. He plants his rocket boost, the rocket from his boot onto Gamora to launch her, and then using his guns on her, because in a fair he can't win a fair fight against her, so he has to.
Yeah, he's very much a trickster kind of fight style. And Gamora is very stealth, knives, or flexibility in combat, which I like. And you see all four of their fighting styles come throughout that action sequence. But I like that once they get captured and you see them in the prison, when they're not allowed their various tools, you see other parts of their personality come out. Whereas, Quill and Gamora both try to melt into the background so that they can assess the situation. Rocket tries to immediately start figuring out the lay of the prison, and when a prisoner comes up to try to make an example of the new guys, Rocket immediately tries to use Groot to be like, no, I run the show now.
I mean, the old adage of find the biggest guy and knock him out.
Well, yeah, and once the biggest guy shows up, Rocket's like, okay, yeah, I realize I look like the tiny little raccoon, but see the giant tree? Yeah, no, that's the muscle.
And we get another cameo here, James Gunn nodding to his roots, because we got a trauma guy here. We got Lloyd Kaufman.
Yeah. So, and we also get as the voice of one of the prisoners, not necessarily the body, we get Nathan Fillion, who was in James Gunn's directorial debut Slither, which I highly recommend if you are able to stomach it. It is not a movie for the faint of stomach. But if you're able to deal with some body horror and some very strange gore, it is an excellent horror film starring Nathan Fillion, and that was the directorial debut of James Gunn. But yeah, James Gunn did get his start in Troma, working for Lloyd Kaufman, the founder and head of Troma.
And then, some people who didn't like what James Gunn had to say had to bring all of that up and then, get him fired. And we all know how that went out.
Yeah. A really interesting moment in Disney Marvel where a bunch of people connected with both Disney and Marvel who had worked with James Gunn over the years basically kind of were like, all right, I don't want to be associated with you anymore if you're going to kick James Gunn out. And Disney Marvel reconsidered and brought him back on board.
But, if that didn't happen, we wouldn't have gotten the good Suicide Squad. But the good Suicide Squad movie.
Yeah, that too. The interesting thing about it, though, is that a lot of people are like, oh, why did they back down on James Gunn? It's because James Gunn actually did the work and actually changed. I've been following James Gunn's career for the entirety of James Gunn's career. I saw onwards? From Troma onwards. You underestimate how long I have been a Troma fan. Back in my early days of going to conventions, Lloyd Kaufman was always there. The Troma table was always a start of mine. I have an autographed copy of Tromeo and Juliet, which was like James Gunn's earliest work with Troma, I think. Also a movie not for the faint of heart. Or faint of stomach, but a very interesting film.
To be fair, that's 90% of Troma.
Yeah. Troma is not a thing you should bring the kiddies to, ever. But if you are a fully grown adult who would like to see some very interesting and strange movies of a certain sort, you have to know what you're getting into with Troma films. It's very interesting that Troma decided to basically do a modern version of a very old play called 'Tis Pity She's a Whore. And if you are a academic literary fan enough to understand what that means, you are both disgusted and intrigued by that. and the fact that James Gunn wrote it and Lloyd Kaufman directed it, and it is a thing that exists. Yeah, and it's actually shockingly well done. So, but yeah, that was one of his earliest projects, and I've been following him since then. And yes, as a guy who worked for Troma when he was younger, he was a bit of an edgelord. And then he grew up.
Unfortunately, a lot of the edgelords didn't.
Yeah, so some people went back and looked at a lot of his edgelord stuff that was on the internet and was like, this is what he still believes. And he went, no, I don't. And you can look at the stuff I post now and see that I don't. And it's true. You can look at the stuff he does now and see that he has changed. And that's what the people around him who stood up for him said. They were like, no, he made jokes. He realized those jokes were harmful. He has disavowed those jokes and doesn't make jokes like that anymore. That is what happens when you grow up as a person. We are going to have to learn as a species that by the nature of the internet, we now have, people like you and I at our age, when we were growing up, we said and did a lot of ridiculous and silly and unadvised stuff. But because that's what kids do and young adults do. We did not have the internet or social media when we were doing them. When we first started on social media, none of us kind of realized that that stuff was going to stick around.
Yeah, we learned very quickly that the internet is forever.
Yeah, and so a lot of us, I think, just kind of said and did stuff where we were like, ha ha ha, this is funny right now, and we didn't think of how it's going to look 5 or 10 years later. And then 5 or 10 years later, if we're good and decent people, I think you always look at yourself 5 or 10 years ago and go, oh man, that was kind of ridiculous. I've learned to be a better person.
I can't believe I was such a dumbass.
Yeah, because that's the nature of growing and changing. Unfortunately, the internet kind of snapshots you along the process of growing and changing. And I think we're going to have to learn as people that just like you look at cringy pictures of you and go, oh, why didn't somebody tell me that hairstyle didn't look good on me? Why didn't somebody tell me that outfit wasn't that fashionable? Okay? That we're going to have to look back at things we said and did on the internet and go, ooh, I'm glad I learned that making jokes like that wasn't very helpful or useful. And then we're going to have to learn to look at the things we say and do today and go, oh, I'm glad that they've learned and changed. And then, learn to judge people by that instead.
And then there are some people who don't change at all, and then because being an edgelord made them famous on the internet, so they have to be an edgelord forever.
Yeah. And I think if you look at somebody 5 years ago and say, ooh, that was cringe, and you go, hey, that thing you said 5 years ago, you still stand by that? And if they go like, yeah, I'm still posting that as of 5 minutes ago, that's when you go, okay, yeah, you're still cringe. You know?
Mm-hmm.
But if you look at somebody like James Gunn, you go, hey, that thing you posted 5 years ago, you still doing that? And he goes, oh no, that was horrific. I have learned better now. Then you go like, okay, cool.
I was young and stupid then.
Yeah. I mean, and I think that's just how we're going to have to learn to just deal with this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
You know? And I think that that's why somebody like James Gunn gets a pass where other people do not, is because he looked at it and by the time it came out, he's like, yeah, that was the old me. Look at the current me. And everybody looked at the current him and was like, yeah, all right.
Yeah. But let's get back to the movie here because we've reached Batista. And yeah, as the wrestling fan in me, oh hey, Batista, he left WWE. He's gonna be a movie star now. And my question was, Batista was never really that good of a promo. How is he gonna turn this into an acting career?
And the answer was amazingly.
Yeah, shocked me. and he would do interviews like he went through, acting class after acting class, trying to perfect that craft and going to audition after audition just to try to get this part. Now, I don't know if he was a fan of the character or he said, hey, the MCU is a big thing now. If I get this role, I'm going to be a big thing. And that's what I think he was going with. And he got the role and, he's turned this into not a bad film career. I mean, a lot of his movies are like Netflix qualities now, but, a film career is a film career.
Yeah, and I mean, I like some of his other roles.
Mm-hmm.
This is still his best role, I think, but at least my personal favorite of his roles. But I've seen him in other stuff, and I'm like, oh yeah, Batista's in this. Like it.
I saw Glass Onion when it came out, and it's like,
oh, he was so good in Glass Onion, yeah.
Yeah, playing what you said, a cringe, a grown-up, cringy edgelord.
Yeah, that kind of manosphere weirdo, yeah. And he was excellent at that, and the reason that joke worked is because that is exactly the opposite type of guy of him for real.
Yeah.
And so that him kind of being like, I know I look like that, but that's kind of the opposite kind of dude of what he is, was just so funny.
And he showed that he can do comedy. Him playing, the literal thing for a joke in here, and also those streaming commercials he did, where he's the fisherman in the boat. I don't know if you've seen those.
Yeah, I've seen those, and those are, I mean, he really just has some of the best comedy chops around.
And again, as I said before, he was never that good of a promo as a wrestler, but he vastly improved when he decided to fully commit to acting.
Yeah. He might just be a guy that's not that great at improv, but, you give him a script and he nails it,
Even when he came back to do, that one WrestleMania, it was still the same level of not that good in a live setting. So maybe just being a film actor with a script is more his forte versus live improv promos.
Yeah, which no shame in that. Some people that's their thing. And if he can deliver on the day with a script, then good for him.
Mm-hmm.
But whatever he's doing, I'm loving it at the moment. So, keep doing that and I'll keep watching. I'm kind of sad that he's saying he's ready to wrap up Drax, though, that the makeup and all that is kind of getting to him, because that is a really makeup heavy role.
I mean, even what we're seeing in the clips in from the trailers, he's kind of going full body on the suit. Yeah. And kind of just doing the makeup on the face.
I mean, that is some really intensive makeup, because they went, the original character in the comics, he was green, but they didn't want people to think like, oh, this is another Hulk situation. Mm-hmm. So they went for gray and scars instead of tattoos. Like the Drax in the comic had like some tattoos he had, but Batista himself is covered in tattoos, and I think they didn't want people to get it confused with like, oh, we're just seeing Batista's tattoos. So they went with the bright red scar patterns to make it look different so that people knew it wasn't just his real tattoos showing through the makeup. So that made it like just a real complex makeup job. So I don't begrudge him that he's wanting to wear more clothing as it's going on to make the makeup job faster, because that's got to be an early day.
It kind of reminds me of Jennifer Lawrence having to do the Mystique makeup for the X-Men and how much she hated it.
Oh yeah, that's just, there's some of those people that you're like, oh, I feel so bad for you, and I want them to find like a CG solution or something.
For all the love we give to movies that are still using practical effects, sometimes maybe. I mean, like I've seen the time lapse films of Karen Gillan putting the Nebula makeup on and how long it is, and granted it's sped up, so these have to be several hours of prosthetics put on her head to make her look like that.
Yeah, I have nothing but respect for any actor that can deal with heavy prosthetics or heavy makeup, because I know how uncomfortable even just small amounts of that is.
Yeah, I mean, even if it's just cosplaying at a convention for a few hours, that's still a lot of prosthetics you're putting on.
Yeah, and just even under like normal fluorescent lights, it gets so hot and sticky, and then you're like, oh, the actual like bright film lights and the reapplication of that for hours after hours after hours, doing all that stunt work and I mean, ugh, yeah.
And with Batista leaving the series after this film, it kind of makes me sad that we're probably not going to get the character of Moondragon, who is Drax's daughter. Also, much like in the comics, he was also given a new body to be a warrior in.
Yeah, well, I mean, when they changed that part of Drax's backstory, when it wasn't like the soul put in a new body, I kind of just figured we were never going to get that character anyway. Because Drax in this one talked about like having seen his wife and child die, and him escaping or being left alive by Thanos, rather than him being given that chance for revenge like he was in the comics.
Yeah.
So
let's talk about the meme now that we're at this point in the movie, because this movie started a meme with Rocket just taking random body parts from people. Like that guy's leg, that guy's arm, that guy's eye. Hey Bucky, how much for the arm?
yeah, I love the idea of Rocket wanting random prosthetic body parts from people. And the fact that, like I said, it came back in that Christmas special with Nebula being the best gift giver. And I teared up a little bit,
I laughed so loud when that box opened and there's Bucky's arm.
And Rocket's just like, Nebula, it's Bucky's arm. How did you even get this? Because I want to know how she got that. Please show us like a short comic or like a scene in What If or something of Nebula going back for Bucky's arm.
I mean, they are filming. I mean, they should start filming the new Captain America movie. I don't know if Bucky's going to be in the film, but if he is, like, just get Karen Gillan for like a day.
And just have Bucky like tell the story for just a second in therapy or something. Like, I want to know how that happened.
Like,
please.
Hey Bucky, are you going to join us on this mission? I can't. Why? I woke up this morning and my arm was missing.
I have to go get it back from that little blue weirdo. Like, but yeah, no, it's such a great thing. But I do love that. I do love that meme of like Rocket being like, I didn't actually need it. I just thought it would be funny. The cool thing about Rocket though is that behind the scenes, the motion capture it's not really motion capture, but like the stand-in on set for them to relate to him has been Sean Gunn.
Yep.
So Bradley Cooper will come in after the fact and lay down the voice, but on set, Sean Gunn, who is there playing one of the Ravagers in the Yondu's crew, what's his name? Kraglin is the name they give him. He's also James Gunn's younger brother.
Yeah, I mean, he also does the motion capture in this movie for Thanos.
Yeah, but he just kind of fills in wherever.
It's funny how like there's 3 characters in this movie that's just Sean Gunn in a mocap suit.
Yeah, but he's been working with his brother. I mean, he started back on Romeo and Juliet as one of the Capulets, I think. So I've been following his career for just as long. But yeah, he does, all the onset stuff for Rocket. And then they fill him in later with CGI, of course. But Rocket is by far my favorite of the Guardians. Close second of Nebula, kind of once she joins as more a full member of the team, but Rocket was immediately kind of my favorite.
And
there.
Rocket, another character that's been allowed to grow as these movies progress. Like in this movie, he's just, he gets ridiculed for just existing. I didn't ask to exist.
Yeah, which was always, I kind of like that scene in the bar where, Peter and Gamora are outside and you'd see like Peter trying to put the moves on Gamora and teach her what pelvic music sorcery is, and yeah, pelvic sorcery of the dancing and all that, and you're like, okay, whatever, they're gonna make this a thing. But but we come back in with the fight with Drax and Rocket and Groot there, and you find out that it started because Rocket was so upset that Drax kept calling him what Vermin. Was it at that point? Vermin, yeah. And then he was pointing out that Gamora had called him a rodent earlier, and that he didn't even know what species he was.
Yeah,
until Peter
Quill said it. Yeah.
Yeah. Because he had never seen anything that looked like him, not even a real raccoon. So I don't know if it's going to turn out that he was just an Earth animal taken. Like I said, we haven't seen the new movie, but I would say that's a big possibility.
I mean, considering we're seeing the other, I don't know, I'll just say because it is in the comics, the other Half-World characters, Possibly.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what exact storyline they're going to give, but one of the trailers shows 3 other animals and they all look identical to Earth animals. So I'm guessing that they're going to say that he was a legitimate Earth raccoon prior rather than some, I mean, they might make it a multiverse thing now that the multiverse is a thing. But if I had a guess, I would say that they're going to say he was just a normal Earth raccoon.
I mean, there's that great scene where they're putting on their prison uniforms and Quill's just looking at Rocket's back and you see the cybernetics in his back.
Yeah, that scene always gets to me because Rocket seems so kind of nonchalant, but also very defensive in that bar scene about what he is. But we get that little moment where you look at him because you can't see any of the cybernetics or the scarring really when Rocket is fully dressed in his battle gear. But in that prison scene, you really do have that moment of, yeah, we understand this is not a regular raccoon because he's walking around and talking and stuff, and they don't generally do that. But you get the full weight finally of what was done to him because somebody said earlier he came from an experimentation on, quote, lower life forms. Mm-hmm. And seeing the scarring and the missing patches of fur and the implants in his spine and stuff like that, it has always been like a really weird and impactful moment whenever I watched that first film back. Yeah. So yeah, I don't really know how much of that they're going to go into in the third movie, but I have a feeling it's more than none. So
yeah, I mean, and we also, originally it was just meant to be a cameo, but now a full-fledged member of the Guardians as of the Christmas special, Cosmo the space dog.
Yeah, who we see in that bit at the end there when we get our cameo by Howard the Duck as well.
I mean, when they first enter the collector's room, his collection room, Rocket kind of gives Cosmo the side eye. Cosmo, based off Laika, the real Russian dog that went to space, the first living creature to be sent into space from Earth, and became super intelligent. But we don't actually see that until we get to the Christmas special.
Yeah. The real Laika, of course, did not become super intelligent. Sadly. Poor Laika.
Yeah.
However, the thing is that the Marvel Universe has always had, like, you just end up on a planet and there's, talking animals and stuff, yeah. Or, there's a bit opens up in the multiverse and it's, oh, this is Duck World where Howard the Duck lives,
This is Pig World where Spider-Ham lives.
Yeah, and he just all of the other characters in that universe are sentient animals, Mm-hmm. But Rocket was always different in how he came to be. And I do like that we're getting a little more into that, especially now that we have characters in the MCU like Alligator Loki and Throg. Mm-hmm. Even though Throg and Alligator Loki are kind of throwaway jokes, we don't really know a lot about their universe and how they came about. They are there, and we've seen them, and they are canon now.
Yeah.
So yeah, I like that we're getting into that, but the Guardians was a really great way of opening up into the weirdness of the MCU or Marvel in general. Because before that, we'd very much stuck to the more acceptable parts of Marvel.
The furthest we got was Thor being an alien, and most of those movies take place on Earth. At least up to this point.
The idea that the Norse gods were really aliens who had visited Earth. That was kind of, they look human but aren't. Was about the weirdest that we had gotten at this point in the MCU. And now we're getting a human talking about like, well, I was with a girl and she had tentacles and teeth in all the wrong places. You don't really see it.
It's the one thing. It's the one thing that bothers me about this movie. Okay, Quill was 10-ish when he left Earth. How does he know what Jackson Pollock is? Or who Jacqueline? How does he know who Jackson Pollock is?
I mean, his mom sounded like a really cool chick. I knew who Jackson Pollock was at 10. I mean, I wasn't a normal kid, but if his mom was going through the thing of, you have to listen to all the music I was into and stuff, she was probably like, and you have to watch all of the movies I was in, because some of those movies, yes, he would have watched because they were the new movies coming out when he was, before he got abducted. But some of the movies he mentions would have had to have been his mom being like, I rented this at the video store and we're going to sit down and watch it.
I can just, I'm pretty sure Quill's like saw Star Wars and stuff like that.
Well, that would have been the new thing, but
it is canon that Peter Quill as a child went to Epcot. Because that's the canon of the ride.
Yeah. But there are some of his things where he was watching them because his mom was into him or his grandparents were into him, rather than, And his mom did seem like from what we know in the second film, his mom did seem like a very artsy, hippie kind of chick. So that does seem more like a reference that his mom would have taught him.
Granted, he made his first appearance in Dark World, but Benicio del Toro as the Collector. Just amazing.
Yeah, and we've talked before about how it's never really mentioned in the movies, but he is supposed to be the brother of Jeff Goldblum's character.
The Grandmaster, yeah. And
the Grandmaster.
The closest we ever get is a picture on Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout at California Adventure of the two together. And I don't know. I mean, we know that the Grandmaster is still out there. If he's still out there. We don't know if the Collector is still around. But, I do want to see those two characters together and see what those two actors can do together.
Yeah, I mean, at the very least, why are they not doing more what ifs for this?
We know there's another season of it, but we don't know when that's coming.
Yeah. I honestly don't know why they're not expanding what ifs into like small shorts, like live action shorts.
Yeah.
Just like grab a couple of actors and shove them on screen for like 3 to 5 minutes, and
and I do like there's like the reference to the Dark World because we have the assistant that was in that scene from the Dark World, now in a cage because apparently she decided to go against him.
Yeah.
And we get
I do really, really respect the one chick that is the unfortunate slave of the collector there. Karina, I think, is the name they give her, who he's like, oh yeah, no, this is an infinity stone. Let me give you an entire like PowerPoint presentation about the infinity stone for the sake of the audience. I don't really know why he's giving it to, like, in the context of the film, I don't know why he's giving it to them other than this is my shiny thing, look at my new shiny thing.
I'm going to say this, I do prefer this version of the explanation versus what we would get in Infinity War.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of like Benicio del Toro kind of giving us his rundown of the Infinity Stones better, but, you know. But yeah, he just stands there and is like, now that you've brought me an Infinity Stone, let me tell you what they're about via this nifty little PowerPoint.
And as it's happening, she's just looking at it. It gives me power. I can be free. I can be free.
Well, no, but one of the things he says is like, no mortal can hold it. And I like that her idea is just like, all right, I'm gonna unalive myself via Infinity Stone. Let's do this.
And just trashes the place.
Yeah, it will either give me power or it will absolutely erase me from existence, and either or, I am okay with that. Let's do it. No hesitation. Because I don't know what he was doing to the poor girl, but I have a lot of thoughts and none of them are nice. So, you know, I mean, bravo to her for picking her moment and, taking the way out.
Right before it, he's berating her because she's not cleaning the cages properly, or to his satisfaction.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not, I'm not looking down on her at all. It's like, the first obligation of a slave is to escape. So, go for it, Chica. That's your out. And she took a lot of his stuff with him, possibly even him.
I mean, post-credit scene, he's fine.
Yeah, post-credit scene, he's fine. But she tried.
And of course, we get the scene where Drax calls in Ronan's forces, and all of it leads up to Gamora being in space, and it's another instance of Quill not being quite human because he's able to survive in the vacuum of space without his helmet on a lot longer than Gamora was.
Yeah.
So this is another hint that Quill isn't quite human.
Yeah, because he is not reacting to the vacuum of space the way he should be, because he's able to, like, look around and, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, granted, he's still, freezing up because space, but he's not, he seems to be doing quite well for someone who is not breathing, period.
Yeah. But I love Rocket freaking out in that moment, and I love when they take them on board and they're Peter negotiates them out. Quill does the whole negotiation of like, hey, if you let us join the crew, Gamora knows where you could sell it. It'll be great, and we'll be able to destroy Ronan. And kind of gets back on Yondu's good side. Yondu's like, hey, I always knew you had a really awesome spine there, my dude. You know, you were my favorite. And then all of a sudden, Rocket just shows back up with, like, Drax standing on top of the ship holding a gun. And he's like, yeah, I designed this thing myself. It's gonna blow a real big hole in your ship.
No, Rocket,
Give me
it's all
back
good.
my friends.
No, Rocket, it's all good. It's all good. Well, everything's cool now. Oh, hey, Quill, how you doing?
Yeah.
I just love like the tonal change in that performance. It's like, I'll kill you all if you don't give me back my friends. Oh, hi, how you doing?
Yeah, but I love that all the Ravagers on the ship are like, yeah, there's no way that tiny little gun is gonna do anything to us. And the only one that believes him is Quill, who's like, no, we are in serious danger. Please let me talk to the absolutely insane raccoon in the ship.
I mean, we saw what that gun can do as from what we saw it to do to Ronan.
Well, yeah, but that's later.
Mm-hmm.
Like, at this point, it's just Rocket making a bluff to everybody. Like, we don't know either, but Quill's the only one that's kind of started to get an idea that Rocket isn't always talking out of his tail about his inventions, because he saw him walk in to the prison and be like, oh, we're escaping this prison, and then immediately just whip up a plan on the spur of the moment when everything went wrong and get them out of the prison.
Mm-hmm.
And I think Quill, in all of his, Quill's not exactly the brightest, but he's just bright enough to realize, like, okay, the talking raccoon walked into the prison and went, I'm gonna be out of here within 24 hours, and we were out of there within 24 hours. Maybe listen to the talking raccoon. Like,
and I do like we kind of flip into I mean, it's a trope, but I do like it. It's the heist montage where they go over the plan as you see the plan unfolding on screen.
Yeah.
Which is kind of cool. And then, get them as, a unified team. Hey, we've all lost something, but now we can make sure no one else has to lose it again, kind of thing. No one else has that, we all lost something. We can make sure no one else loses anything else, and make sure that, the innocent people of Xandar don't have to die for our mistake.
Yeah, but I love them all, standing up and being like, we're with you. And then they look at Rocket. He's like, great. Yeah, I'm standing up too. We're all standing here like idiots in a circle. Everybody feel better now? Yeah, okay. Because I'm with Rocket. Like, why do I have to stand up? I can just sit here and agree with you. And then I'm comfortable and agreeing with you. Like, why do I have to stand up? You know I'm with you. Just let me sit here and be comfortable and agree with you.
The dogfight on Xandar between the Ravagers and Ronan's forces is actually pretty cool.
Yeah, and Peter Serafinowicz, coming to help with the Nova Corps forces and being like, hey, Quill, I was against this. Please do not make me, regret showing up and helping.
I mean, I just like a John C. Reilly trying to talk to Glenn Close. Like, he says he is an a-hole, but he's not a dick.
Well, do you believe him? Well, I don't think anybody's 100% a dick. Like, so she's like, no. Do you think he's here to help? Oh, yeah. No, yeah, I think he's here to help. Okay.
I mean, the way they explain it is, they're wanted fugitives. Why would they go back to the planet where they're wanted fugitives if they don't have any, if they weren't there to help,
Yeah, I mean, just let Ronan destroy the planet.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's sound logic,
Mm-hmm. I think it's also part of the reason why they didn't go into the comic book Nova having the powers from the helmet, because it would have made this fight a little unfair. Essentially having like 40 Green Lanterns against Ronan's forces.
Yeah, plus you'd have to like CGI a bunch of random dudes flying around, and it's much easier to do that with ships, I think, you know.
And like and just can we talk a little bit about Michael Rooker as Yondu? Because we haven't.
Oh, I would love to talk about Michael Rooker all day in any part.
Like again, Yondu, the only member of the Guardian 3000 team that's in this movie, and he just talks like Michael Rooker.
Well, I mean, it's one of those things of some people get typecast for a reason. You know, if you get Christopher Walken, you want him to be Christopher Walken.
Yes, true.
You know, if you get Michael Rooker, you want him to be Michael Rooker.
You get Sam Jackson, he's going to be Sam Jackson. You get Jeff Goldblum, he's going to be Jeff Goldblum.
Yeah, I mean, there's just some people that you know what you're getting, and you want them to be that.
Just that whole like sort of tough love father figure to Peter, and the Ravagers kind of call him out on it. It's like, you're soft on the boy. You always let him get away with this stuff.
Well, I do agree with Quill when he's like, who uses the threat of being eaten against a child? But I do also understand that with Yondu, that was perfectly normal, you know?
Just the scene where they tease all movie about that arrow, and when he finally gets a chance to really let loose with that arrow with the whistling, it's a cool scene.
I agree, and I think that there is nothing cooler than we get the setup for the whistling arrow on the ship, where he's holding it to Quill's throat, and you're like, this seems kind of weird, you know? And then you get him down on the planet facing Ronan's forces, and they're like, ha, we have you surrounded. And he's like, oh, really? Do you? And then he just starts whistling, and the arrow starts whipping around. And then he stops whistling and grabs the arrow, and just all the guys fall down in sequence.
It's a hell of a scene. It's a great scene.
Yeah. He's just such a fun presence, and I love that they finally give him more to do in
the second
movie, yeah.
That the audience had such positive reception to the character in this film that Gunn said, you know what, we're gonna do more with this character. We're gonna make him more, put him more in the movie. As I've said, we've talked about this before, but it's like the MCU, they just know how to pull on your heartstrings. That the death of a tree can make you cry. That whole "We Are Groot" scene, I did well up in the theater when I first saw this movie.
Yeah,
like,
when
the explosions are happening around them, Groot just grows his body around them. Rocket saying, "Groot, what are you doing? You'll die."
Yeah. And to a lesser extent, that beautiful scene where they're on the ship and he's like, I can't see a thing, and Groot like puts out the bioluminescent, whatever that is.
It shows that Groot is a lot more powerful than he's letting on.
Yeah, but that whole thing where, Groot saves them, and then they go down, and they're still fighting Ronan, and I love Quill's bit about why would you want to, save the galaxy? Why do you care about the galaxy? Just let Ronan do whatever, Thanos do whatever. And he's like, well, I'm one of the idiots who lives in the galaxy.
He's got a point.
Yeah. And it always reminded me of possibly one of the best episodes of The Tick ever to air. Which was, I believe it's called The Tick versus the Big Nothing. And the aliens are trying to explain to the Tick why it's such a big existential crisis. And they're like, look, this is Earth. It is where you keep your stuff. Now it is gone. He's like, no, not my stuff. And so, I laughed so hard in the theater when I first saw that, where Quill was like, yeah, I care about the galaxy. I'm one of the idiots who lives in it,
Yeah. And just, all the plan going to perfection, and Quill just shooting Ronan with that gun that they teased the entire movie. And he gets up because he has the Power Stone.
Yeah, and the dance off being the final resolution, because we started the movie that same way.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we get that callback to the thing the Collector said about, there were the people who were able to hold on to it for slightly longer by combining their powers, but it destroyed them all.
And then, yeah, you get Quill holding the stone, and then Gamora holds on to Quill, and then Drax holds on to Quill, and then Rocket holds on to Drax, and they're all in pain, that purple light burning their bodies, and all of a sudden they just, all four just stand together. The pain is gone, and they're just saying, and they're just using that stone to its full potential. How are you doing this? Well, like you said, we're the Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah.
And I do like that.
Also, one of them is, has a secret.
Half God. One of them is half God.
Yeah.
But I do, I mean, it is very interesting that it's Ronan that gives them the name Guardians of the Galaxy.
Because, and it's meant to be an insult.
Yeah. These are your guardians. These are the people who are going to guard the galaxy from me. And then they take that name, and yeah, we're the Guardians now. And it's a great scene, and especially the callback to the hospital scene where Quill's mother is saying, "Take my hand, Peter, take my hand," and then you hear Gamora, "Peter, take my hand." It was kind of like Quill's redemption for not taking his mother's hand all those years ago.
Yeah. But we get that, and the other thing I like is that I really hadn't noticed until this rewatch, because I hadn't watched this one all the way through in a few years, which is, kind of after the resolution, and they do the swap with the stone, and, they get their records expunged. I do like the bit where Rocket's like, okay, but if a guy has some stuff, and I really want that stuff, like more than that guy wants that stuff, can I take that stuff? And they're like, no, that's theft. You can't take that stuff. And he's like, but you don't understand. I really want that stuff, though. I mean, you can't argue with that logic. It's good sound logic, Rocket, And then I also like Drax's logic about, okay, but a guy is really annoying me, and I remove his spine. That's okay, though, right? Like, no, that's murder. Literally the worst crime. I think two of my favorite bits in the movie are right there at the end, which is one where Rocket is so in grief over losing Groot that he lets Drax pet him.
Yeah, he gets.
And then it's not like, Drax isn't doing it like
Sarcastically, George.
Yeah, it's
genuine.
It's real. Yeah, it's genuine. He wants to comfort Rocket,
His friend. They're friends now. Although, don't call your friend, don't call your lady friend a whore, Drax. Don't do that.
Well, I like that he insults Gamora and then immediately beats the crap out of somebody else for doing the same thing.
Yeah.
No
one says that to my friend.
Yeah. It's a very kind of like big brother move, It's like,
I can tease you, but nobody else does.
Yeah. And then the bit at the end where I had forgotten that they had used basically the same line earlier on in the MCU, where Quill says, what should we do? Something good, something bad, bit of both. Which, if you know anything about in comic book universe, Peter Quill is a really funny line in retrospect. Because in universe, Peter Quill is quite a bit of both. In the more Loki sense.
Yeah.
And it makes me very sad we will never get to see that in the films.
Yeah. And of course we get, he finally opens that gift from his mom, and it's Volume 2 Awesome Mix, and we get a whole new set of songs, and
which will be the soundtrack to the sequel, which is how they tease the sequel at the end.
Yeah, that's a little bit of sequel bait, and we get Baby Groot, the first appearance of Baby Groot as a sapling.
Yeah.
And man, after this movie came out, so many people they released the dancing Groot potted plant,
which I have.
Yeah, and it's like that was like everyone wanted that.
Yeah, I mean, I had it. It was sound. I mean, I still have it somewhere. It's sound activated. You turn it on, and anytime you speak or play music or breathe or walk past it in a gentle breeze, it starts dancing. It was cute, but eventually you had to turn it off because it was the sound microphone on that to make it start dancing was so sensitive. But it was cute.
Yeah. Of course, our post-credit scene, we get Howard the Duck. The first appearance of Howard the Duck since that original movie.
Yeah, and honestly, I'm really annoyed that they haven't used him more.
And I love that, this is a post-Lucasfilm acquisition, because Howard the Duck was a Lucasfilm project. That was a George Lucas project. So they technically now had the film rights to Howard the Duck.
Well, here's the thing. Let me ask you, when you saw this in the theater, how did the theater respond to Howard the Duck?
I don't think they knew who he was. I did not expect Seth Green to be voicing him.
Yeah, I really loved that it was Seth Green. My theater, there was an initial moment of shock, and then after it went to black and it was like Howard the Duck created by, and people were like, oh my god, that really was Howard the Duck. There were a couple of people that was like, why was there a duck? Because they were too young to kind of realize. But all of the older audience that like knew who Howard the Duck was, like we absolutely lost our minds. And there were quite a few of us.
Yeah, like
because it was an opening night showing in a packed theater, and there was like so much like, oh my god, we're getting a new Howard Duck movie. Oh my god, Howard Duck, oh my god, and I was like, it was such a like overwhelming reaction, at least in my theater, that I'm so shocked that they haven't actually done anything with Howard the Duck, and also I haven't heard any rumors that they're even planning to.
Like there was rumors of a Howard the Duck series, but this was before Marvel Studios had taken over all the television stuff. Howard the Duck was going to be a Hulu series, and it was going to be it was going to connect to that MODOK series,
which was such a good series, and I hate that after what happened with Quantumania, we will probably never get anything MODOK ever again.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm so depressed I'm not even going to get into it, but that MODOK series was amazing. Go watch that MODOK series on Hulu. It was so good.
Yeah, it was going to be MODOK, Hit Monkey, Howard the Duck, and I believe Tigress. And then they were going to lead to a Hulu original movie called The Offenders.
I heard about MODOK and Hit Monkey. I don't think I ever heard about the other two.
They never got made.
Well, I mean, I heard that they were planning, but yeah. I don't even think I heard the rumors, which is kind of shocking.
Yeah, that was, at least that's how it was explained. How I read the article. That was the original plan prior to Feige taking over all of the television of Marvel. That was the original plan, was going to be, and it's and then that's stuff that I kind of feel bummed out that we're not going to get that, and the Gabriel Luna Ghost Rider series that was planned.
Well, the thing is that there still might be hope for that in future because of some of the stuff they're doing now with Daredevil Born Again.
Possible.
Is that everything that I keep hearing about Daredevil Born Again keeps showing more of a trend to try to bring in older bits of what Marvel Television had done. Not all of it. Like, it's definitely clear that they're wanting to retcon or ignore some of the stuff that Marvel Television had done. But just think about it. Recently, they brought in Black Bolt
for the
into the MCU. Even if it was an alternate universe version, they've at least said that the Inhumans exist.
Mm-hmm. And it was the same actor too.
Okay. So they've at least admitted that the Inhumans exist. Okay. And they've brought in, Patrick Stewart in that same thing. So mutants exist, even if they might retcon the main MCU reasoning,
Yeah.
And actors. So these things are in play now, It might just be that, we had the version of Ghost Rider that was in S.H.I.E.L.D., of course. And there's been a lot of talk of, are they going to completely discount what happened in the S.H.I.E.L.D. TV series or not? Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
There's still heavy rumors that those characters might show up in Secret Invasion.
Which I would hope. And we're still waiting to see, because that's, going to be a couple of months still. before we get to see any of Secret Invasion. So I would hope that part of that would come through. But if they're going to do anything with Ghost Rider, they're probably going to have to reconcile once and for all what's going on there, you know?
Because Shield is pretty much is saying Johnny Blaze is out there, and he was the one that gave the Gabriel Luna character the Ghost Rider powers.
Yeah.
Which but people still want Nicolas Cage to come back for that. I don't necessarily agree, but I understand the reasoning.
Yeah, and I mean, Nick Cage has mellowed some since then, and you know, I mean, I could be down for, you know, him just being an older version, you know, coming in to pass on the torch,
the
mantle, a flaming bike tire or something. But they're gonna have to reconcile these things. But the thing that I had hoped with the multiverse idea breaking open is that we would get the idea of the MCU not being a single unit anymore. As much as I have loved the interconnected one big story of the MCU, one of the things that I had hoped for with bringing the multiverse in was that there would be room for other creators to play without being tied up with you have to use your particular series or film to set up the grand meta-narrative of whatever this phase is dealing with.
Individual projects that don't necessarily fit in with the larger Marvel universe, you're saying?
Yeah, I would like to have side stories. That's what I've loved about the What If series. And honestly, to me, the What If series, I kind of hated how tied into the main series it ended up being. Because the whole thing at the end kind of ended up being a meta-narrative about, you know, Strange Supreme or whatever. Like learning that you have to take care of the multiverse or some junk, you know? And it's kind of like I wanted them to be individual vignettes about stuff that could happen in the Marvel Universe. I kind of wanted WandaVision to just be like Wanda having a story. I kind of wanted Loki to just be Loki having a story, or 18, you know? I wanted it to be Loki skipping through his 1,000+ years of existence, just being like, hey, I remember the time that I did whatever. And it ended up being like, let's set up the next couple of phases of which I'm fine with as well, in the sense of, you know, Marvel Universe is built on the two pillars of daddy issues and Loki, but it was like that with mostly all of them, except for, you know, a couple of them seemed to get away a little bit. And those were the ones where people were like, yeah, I didn't quite like them as much. Except I loved them. I loved She-Hulk for just being She-Hulk. And I really wanted to see more stories in that, because she got to just be her own thing. And didn't have to spend all her time setting up like whatever Kang is going to be doing, or whatever.
They clearly set up that there's going to be some sort of Hulk movie at some point.
Yeah, and honestly, I kind of, all the parts that were like, let's set up a Hulk movie, I liked those the least out of the rest of it. I don't know what, if anything, they were trying to set up with Moon Knight, but I kind of respected Moon Knight for just being like, hey, I'm gonna go off and be my own thing. I would have liked Ms. Marvel better if it started out, I think, with the Marvels and then went into a Ms. Marvel TV show.
Rather than the other way around.
Rather than the other way around, because it felt like a, 6 or 8, however long, episode origin story, and an origin story should only be 2 hours at most. That then is going to lead into basically another origin story for this same character. And then maybe in season 2, we can get just like her weekly adventures of being a superhero, which is what I wanted. I wanted her just skipping around her, that's the good thing about these quote unquote street level heroes, is I want it to just be like day in the life of a superhero, or maybe season in the life of a superhero. And I love, the reason I loved the Marvel comics is because you could dip into the lives of various Marvel superheroes, and they were all kind of a little bit different unless they were doing a big team up, and they didn't really have to connect unless they were doing a big team up every other year or something. You might have like, oh, this is leading up to the big, grand story they're doing for some big event. But most of the time it was just Spider-Man's doing his own thing, and Iron Man's got his own thing, and Black Widow's over there doing whatever, and She-Hulk's over there doing her thing, and Scarlet Witch is doing whatever she's doing, and the X-Men have, their 17 books, and you could dip in and out of all these different stories, and they were taking place in all different other kind of places, most of them in New York, granted, but some of them in space, or some of them in a different dimension, or whatever. And you could kind of pick where you wanted to go, and who you wanted to follow, and what you wanted to be, and you didn't necessarily have to be following everybody all the time to figure out everything. You could, and that was fun if you wanted, but if Spider-Man bored you for a bit, it was fine. You still had 8 other people to follow, and I kind of want that. I want that back, and I want them to maybe have that be in the multiverse thing, or even in the same universe. Like, keep them all in the sacred timeline, and just maybe be like, okay, they don't all have to be the same, And that's what I loved about Guardians for the longest time, is like,
they just did their own thing.
Yeah, they did their own thing, and then you knew that eventually when the Infinity War saga, got around to it, they'd show up and be like, oh, hey, was somebody looking for an Infinity Stone? Like, but for the most part, it was like nobody on Earth knew who these people were, or what they were doing, or why they should care. And then they showed up and people were like, talking raccoon, walking tree. Okay, that's fine, but we gotta go fight the California raisin dude now. We will worry about this later. Yeah. And that's what I loved. Like, I didn't want everybody to have to, that should be a big event, and not just like, oh, great, I have to
Gotta watch all the movies to figure out what all the characters are doing before we even get to the team up.
Yeah, and you know, I'm gonna steal a joke from pitch meeting, but Ryan over at pitch meeting like had a great joke about like we're Disney. You must watch everything on Disney Plus to understand everything we're doing, you know? And he made it about Star Wars because Star Wars is doing that now, and we just talked about that last week.
Yeah.
You know, like I don't want to have to watch, you know, I just want to have to watch like the movies or, you know, whatever. I don't have to also want to have to watch 7 live action series and 4 cartoon shows and read a whole bunch of novels. And
you don't
honestly,
want to do homework before you have to watch a movie.
Yeah, and MCU is kind of getting a little like that, and I love the MCU. I personally will choose to do that of my own volition. I don't want to have to do that. And I think when people are talking about superhero burnout, that's what they're talking about. Not that they don't want to go see superhero movies, but that they don't want to have to go like, okay, what's my homework to understand the superhero movie?
But that has been a boom for the YouTube video makers who make their compilations and here's everything you need to know before you see superhero, X movie here.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, okay, that's a great cottage industry, I guess, but like you shouldn't have to, you know?
Mm-hmm.
You shouldn't have to do that. It should be a fun thing. This should be a fun thing. I want Marvel to be a fun thing for everybody. It's still a fun thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
But I want it to be a fun thing for everybody. I don't want people to have a glazed over look in their eyes of like, okay, what's my homework assignment before we go to the movie? I've got 2 weeks left before it comes out. All right, just give me a watch list.
And that's kind of, I mean, that's why I do like that Disney Plus has these Marvel Legends videos that they've been releasing. That is just, here's all of the important stuff before the new movie comes out.
I mean, yeah, it's helpful, but once again, like maybe simplify it. Maybe put all that stuff in your movie.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you're right. But again, yeah. So getting back on track here, Kiki, does Guardians of the Galaxy 1 have the magic?
Of course. I love this movie to itty bitty little bits. I mean, they had me at James Gunn. They were just like, James Gunn is doing a Marvel movie, and I was like, the guy that did Slither, the guy that used to work for Troma. I have no idea what this is, but count me in. And they were like, it's going to have a talking raccoon in it, and I'm like, that sounds even better. So yeah, no, I absolutely love this movie. I've loved all of the Guardians stuff, and I can't wait for the new movie, which I hope to be seeing before this drops. So
me too. I will agree. The movie's still good. The movie still has the magic. I can't wait for Volume 3. Again, we are recording this before the movie has been released. Hopefully, both of us have seen the movie before this episode is released.
Yeah.
But we'll see. Yeah. So yeah, Guardians 1 still got it. Thumbs up.
Yep.
So let's move on to next week. Ooh, this is one we've wanted to do for a while. Honey, I Shrunk the Kids.
Yeah, I really wanted to talk about this one because there has been a video game kind of version of this going around that a lot of the Let's Players have been doing called Grounded, and I was like, wait a minute, this is just Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, the video game. So I was like, why don't we just do Honey, I Shrunk the Kids? It was such a massive film when we were young. let's talk about that film and see if it holds up, because I honestly have not seen the film in a very long time.
Neither have I. So it's going to be fun to go back to that film, and it's Rick Moranis. He's awesome.
Yeah, and I absolutely adore him, and he took a long break there and has started coming back on the scene. So we will go back to the heyday of Rick Moranis movies.
All right, so come back next week for Honey, I Shrunk the Kids, and we will talk to you all next time. Bye.
Bye. Don't let the magic stop here.
Join our conversation online on Facebook at Rewatching the Magic,
Twitter at Rewatch the Magic,
and of course, new episodes every week at rewatchingthemagic.podbean.com.
Remember, the magic is for everyone.
It only stops if you let it. Podcasts are fun,
but there's work to be done.
We encourage you to get involved. Here are some organizations we support.
The American Civil Liberties Union fights for the constitutional rights of all Americans. Find them at aclu.org.
The National Network of Abortion Funds helps people find access to safe abortion services. Their site is abortionfunds.org.
The Trevor Project provides a 24/7 crisis helpline for LGBTQ youth and education services for schools on LGBTQ issues. They can be found at thetrevorproject.org.
Or find a way to help in your area.